Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I have the pleasure of starting off our presentation for our Natural Heritage System Study for the United Counties of Prescott and Russell. And I'll begin with a few comments on meeting procedure and some information on our agency, the South Nation Conservation Authority, while people begin to tune in. We expect this meeting to be less than an hour. We're aiming for about 45 minutes, but we'll see how things roll out tonight, especially with questions. For those familiar with our usual consultation process, especially when it comes to updating floodplain maps, we've really enjoyed the ability to meet people right in their communities, usually in the closest arena or school, and to really sit down one-on-one, show you the draft maps in relation to your property, and talk about some of the things that you've seen on or near your property that might be relevant to our study. Obviously, we're not able to do that this year, so we are hosting our meetings online. But to help scope some of the feedback that we're looking for, we have created a few different online engagement tools that we'll review at the end of the meeting. For questions that you might have as we go through the presentation, we have two options for you. The first is to drop a message in the video chat, and either someone from our team will respond to you or link you up with the information you need, or we'll try and answer your questions at the end of our presentation. The other option, which will be more personal, is to connect with us directly after the presentation on our project webpage at nation.on.ca/NHS. There's a reservation link where you can fill out a request form to meet with one of our team members over the next few weeks. There's also forms available to provide us with direct feedback on the project. We have two presenters tonight from South Nation, myself, John Messman, and I'm joined by my colleague, Allison McDonald. And we will be delivering our presentation by sharing our screens in a virtual meeting that we're broadcasting to our YouTube channel. And I say this because since we are broadcasting the meeting, there will be a delay for us to see some of your questions in the chat, but feel free to drop comments throughout the meeting and we'll do our best to get to them when we can. We've included a summary of some of the topics we're hoping to cover tonight. However, as you can imagine, there are lots of things that we can talk about in only a short amount of time. Our goal with this meeting is to provide as much information as possible and to help everyone understand what this project is and what it is not, which will hopefully help you understand what work has already occurred over the last few years to create these draft maps and what policies already exist that we're looking to update, and with the aim of effectively scoping them to where we think they're needed most. Please note that all of the materials that we'll discuss are posted on our project webpage at nation.on.ca/NHS and are also available in French. Ce site est également disponible en français. Il suffit de cliquer sur l'onglet français en haut de la page de notre site web et vous pourrez également accéder à toutes ces informations en français. Pour sauver le temps ce soir, nous allons partager uniquement la présentation en anglais dans cette vidéo. Mais si vous avez des questions par la suite ou si vous souhaitez nous parler directement en français, nous pouvons facilement mettre en français un moment pour parler. And for those maybe less familiar with our agency, we wanted to start off with a few comments on who we are and what do we do to help you understand our role in conservation and why we were contracted by both counties to complete this study. We are one of Ontario's 36 conservation authorities, and we operate under provincial legislation called the Conservation Authorities Act. But we also deliver other work through agreements with provincial ministries and our own municipalities to deliver local environmental services. In our region of Eastern Ontario, we work for 16 different municipalities, including the City of Ottawa and municipalities in Leeds-Grenville, Prescott-Russell, and SDNG, with our watershed jurisdiction around the South Nation River and its tributaries, beginning near the headwaters in Brockville and ending near Plantagenet, where the river empties into the Ottawa River. Our jurisdiction also extends to both the St. Lawrence and Ottawa River shorelines. These jurisdiction expansions have occurred in recent years at the request of our member municipalities to help deliver vital services like floodplain mapping and flood forecasting. Our work is also governed by our board of directors, which are comprised of municipal elected officials that are appointed by our municipalities every year. One of the main objectives of our work is to protect people and property from natural hazards like flooding, erosion, and landslides, and to support sustainable development activities through environmental and technical reviews to ensure that new development is safe and sustainable. On behalf of our municipal partners and the province, we also study, map, and regulate areas with increased development pressure where there are known hazards. And we work directly with people to make sure that projects can keep you and your investment, along with your neighbor and their property, safe while contributing to a healthy environment. We also complete environmental monitoring work to help report on watershed conditions and environmental health. And we use this information to inform environmental reviews for new development projects, but also to help us fundraise and direct our fundraising dollars towards areas in poor health to get more trees along watercourses, manage things like invasive species on our properties, and to restore important wetlands, for example. We also deliver a number of different environmental stewardship programs through agreements and with funding from our municipal partners, including things like roadside tree programs, water quality improvement programs for farmers that offer things like cost share funding for projects to help improve water quality. We also have an ash tree replacement program in the city of Ottawa, and probably our most popular service being our tree planting program, which is often what people know us most for. There are a variety of different tree planting programs and subsidies that we use to support planting trees every year. In some cases, we're able to sell trees to property owners for as low as 20 cents a conifer and 50 cents per deciduous tree, which includes planting and tending. And while our spring tree planting season is still a few months away, staff are already gearing up to plant the most trees we've ever planted in our agency's history, nearly 230,000 tree seedlings. A final slide for our overview. We wanted to mention that we are a public land trust, and we have been working to protect significant natural spaces through acquiring land since 1970 through partial purchase and donation. Some properties have been acquired for flood mitigation, some to keep them from being developed, like areas within the Castleman to Lemieux potential retrogressive landslide area, and others were acquired to contribute to a sustainable natural heritage system and for public community benefit. We now own over 13,000 acres of forested land. We manage the SDG County Forest on their behalf and operate 15-day use parks that we call conservation areas. And I wanted to mention that many of our parks and natural spaces are on land that has been donated to us by people to help protect and conserve their families' natural legacies. As a land trust, we're able to offer significant tax benefits, equal in some cases to the price of local forests of interested donors, which is an added benefit and a great way to help ensure that your favorite forest can continue to remain on the landscape in perpetuity. And with that, I will pass the microphone virtually off to Allison to start us off on our Natural Heritage Systems presentation tonight.
Thanks, John. I'm Allison McDonald. I'm the team lead for the approvals department here at South Nation, and I've been working away in the background on the building blocks for this study for a few years now. And I'm happy to bring it to you guys tonight to kind of tell you about what we've been doing. We're going to start with a little background on natural heritage system planning. So really what natural heritage system planning does is recognize that all of the natural features on our landscape are truly connected. They don't exist in isolation. And when we say natural features, we're talking about forests, rivers, wetlands, and also other lands like agricultural lands. And we treat these systems as sort of two large components, one being our core natural area and the other being the linkage that connects those core natural areas. And natural heritage system planning is the recognition that these linkages are essential to support the wildlife movement in the area. And this movement is in itself needed to ensure there's genetic diversity on the landscape. So animals need to move to exchange genetic material, and that's what truly keeps the biodiversity strong within our area, supports those natural functions, and keeps our ecosystems thriving. So the study is a partner study, and it was sort of born from an idea where the two counties, Stormont Dundas and Glengarry, and Prescott and Russell, decided they wanted to work together on completing a natural heritage system. And they asked South Nation to complete the study for them. And this was because they wanted to do a study that would go beyond their own municipal boundaries. They wanted to recognize that the county level natural heritage system should be regional. And they recognize that South Nation exists across municipal boundaries and is an expert at working sort of on that scale. So the counties came together, and I think in the interest of efficiency, of saving money for taxpayers, but also in the interest of having a consistent product for people who live and work between both counties. So it was really a great opportunity to work with these two counties and bring our experience to bear on this project. And so we also invited the Raisin Region Conservation Authority to join us in this partnership, as they have jurisdiction within the United Counties of SDNG. The high-level goals of our project that we identified from early on were to identify our key natural heritage features and the supporting areas like linkages, recognize that the corridors between these features are essential, and actually put them on the map for everyone to see. We also wanted to improve our environmental policies. We knew that we had some that didn't work quite the way we wanted them to. And unfortunately, when these policies don't work properly, they tend to get diluted, not applied when they should be, missed, and it really is a detriment to the natural environment. So that was an important key area for us to work on. We know that there's a lot of good land and water stewardship going on within our watershed, but we wanted to provide a scientific basis to target that where it would be needed most. And we feel the natural heritage system does that. It shows the areas that are essential to keep wildlife healthy and happy on our landscape. By protecting the natural heritage system, we also have a goal to enhance our regional biodiversity, protect our Indigenous species and our ecosystems, and subsequently will mitigate the effects of climate change, including flooding and drought, by keeping more wetlands and forest cover on the landscape. And last but not least, we want to make sure there is a natural legacy here for future generations. So where does this study cover? It actually covers all local municipalities within both counties. So all the way from South Dundas on the St. Lawrence River up to Hawkesbury on the Ottawa River. All of these local municipalities were invited to participate in the study and help to make the results even stronger. It's important to note that the requirement to do a natural heritage study comes from the province. The counties are required by the provincial policy statement to do this work. And the specifics of the policy statement are around protecting these natural features for the long term, which is one goal of our project, and also to recognize diversity and connectivity of natural features, and the long-term ecological function and biodiversity of the system must be maintained, restored, or where possible, improved, recognizing these linkages. So this is sort of the high-level guidance that the province provides to the counties, and that is taken by the counties and interpreted in their official plans. And their choice was to do this study and actually put a real good scientific basis into establishing these areas. So why are we updating the natural heritage system? The counties do have a basic natural heritage linkage system on their official plan right now, which was sort of established through visual identification, and we are looking to update that. They committed to doing this study and committed to doing it as a partnership study to make it the best it could possibly be. And we feel that this updated landscape analysis, which will explain to you what we did, will better define these corridors on the landscape. And as I mentioned, we also felt that there were policy updates needed in order to streamline some development where there's minimal impact, but add more protection to our large natural core areas that we really want to see stay on the landscape in the long term. So we mentioned that South Nation Conservation was requested to do this study, and it's mostly because of our experience working with landowners on environmental issues over many, many years. We also have a strong knowledge of the scientific nature of the ecosystems within the area. We've been collecting data for a long time. We manage a lot of conservation lands within the area, and we often engage with the public on environmental issues. The other benefit is that our planners and our engineers and our ecologists often review development applications and work with the official plan on a regular basis. So we have a real inherent and personal knowledge of how this stuff works and the things that we think could be better. So this experience put us in an ideal position to work with the counties and identify all the opportunities, gaps, challenges, and better areas for clarification.
And I think too, from that, Allison, I mean, we've got a lot to gain. We've got a big stake in the natural heritage system business in our corner of the province. People have been donating land to us for over 40 years, and we've done our best to add ecologically sensitive land to the public trust. Combined with our tree planting efforts, tree bank and wetland regulations, and habitat restoration and community stewardship work, there's certainly lots that we can do that can benefit these systems. And like you, we all know that water, forests, and the environment in general isn't limited by political borders. And our integrated watershed management approach to our business puts us in an ideal position to bring people together. I also wanted to make a plug for our forest conservation initiative at some point, and this seems like a good enough time. For those familiar with our past reports on forest cover trends and our community working groups in recent years, this type of analysis was recommended by the working group participants. First, with an agricultural working group in 2017, which included 24 different farm representatives appointed by the various local ag membership associations in our region, followed by a much larger multi-stakeholder group in 2018, which included those same ag reps who met with municipalities, First Nations, woodlot associations, and other community stakeholder groups, all with the goal of coming up with a series of recommendations for our municipalities to consider when it came to forest conservation. An updated natural heritage system was chief among some of the discussion that the group had, and something that both counties felt important to update. I wanted to drop that thought here while I could, because I think it's important to note that many of the challenges discussed at those working groups were also shared by our municipalities when we met with them late in 2019. And the goal of that meeting, as Allison alluded, was to sit down seriously and constructively and talk about ways that we could improve our work, to improve our policies, to conserve what we value most in the natural heritage system, and streamline environmental reviews where we can outside the system to help save people time and money. Now, because this is a county project, we also wanted to comment on the scale of the study and the merits of a regional approach. The province has required NHS policies and mapping for some time. And if you check out our FAQ document online, you'll see that we've included some different examples of neighboring studies completed with similar methodology in places like the city of Ottawa and Leeds Grenville, for example. When you look at our draft maps online, we've also included arrows that show where we connected our draft linkages to other existing studies. Natural heritage systems need to complement themselves in theory and practice, and policy should ensure that the integration of good natural heritage systems planning is possible at multiple levels, be it the regional, watershed, subwatershed, or secondary plan level. And like all policies, they are guidelines that must also support field verification of the features that we identify. And I'll be honest here, we've received already a few questions from folks around the inclusion of smaller community forests or other protected features like areas of natural and scientific interests to be included in the system. Some of these areas, for example, already have great environmental protections or are publicly owned. However, they might not have fit into the maps we've put together. And largely, it may be because the features were too isolated, fragmented, or possibly difficult to connect to some of these larger cores that we've identified. And Allison's going to share some examples on how we did this analysis. As part of this exercise, we mapped as many potential features as possible and provided this analysis to our municipal partners. Regional cores were selected to be the biggest, least fragmented, meaning they needed to be already connected, and they needed to be socially significant, which means, again, we want our cores, our regional cores, to first already exist. We want them to already exist on the landscape. And we want to be able to make sure that they're significant, they have existing protections. And something that was super important for us and our partners was to find regional cores that also had large tracts of public land. We wanted to make sure that these lands would be available for future generations and accessible to people. Ultimately, this does mean that not all areas will be able to be included in a regional system, but it is still possible to explore the significance of other areas, and some municipalities may choose to include local areas within their own policies, which is a common practice. This might also be an area where people will have a lot of feedback on, so we encourage you to reach out and let us know so that we can investigate these areas further with your municipality. So why does it all matter? Why is it important? It's one thing to have an open conversation about what do we value and how best do we protect and conserve what we value. But the true goal is to ensure that what we value, what we map, and the policies we update to protect them are implemented effectively in practice. We all know that our communities continue to grow. We have large communities being designed and built as we speak, and new homes coming online every day within our region. As communities grow and road networks expand, We need strong green infrastructure to ensure a sustainable and resilient landscape. And we need to make sure we're building our communities in the right places in the right way. A stronger, resilient landscape will also provide us with a better legacy and hopefully economic prosperity as well. And thinking locally, and maybe this is a small scale example, but here's a thought. I understand, for example, that the forest beside my parents' home and farm in North Stormont will eventually be cleared for new farmland or housing development. Likely not in their lifetime, though possible. There is some certainty that it will happen in mine. But what I would love to make certain is that the nearby Warwick Forest, for example, and the area around it will still be here in 100, 200, or 500 years, and that it will still be naturally connected to other regional cores. Planning and development is a balancing exercise, and our involvement in development review is to find a balance between people and nature, economy, and ecology. The benefit of working at a regional or watershed scale helps us to look beyond the individual site or proposed subdivision. We need to look beyond the building envelope to consider the impacts on the remaining natural features that we have on our landscape, areas that we collectively want to make sure are around in the future. Using this illustration that we made, we know this. We know that habitat loss and fragmentation are the leading causes of species decline in Ontario, and that climate change is causing shifts in the ranges of our species. Roads also make it difficult for species to travel. Urban sprawl can destroy wildlife habitat and productive farmland. Intense development can cause flooding. Development and industrial activity can also isolate or destroy, in some cases, natural features. And housing development can also remove productive farmland. But we also know that forests, wetlands, and other natural areas support biodiversity and can help protect communities from the impacts of climate change. We also know that intensification in urban areas can help reduce sprawl. Wildlife rely on large core features like wetlands, rivers, and forests. Wide corridors and connections between these areas will allow our wildlife to move more safely. Connected features improve ecological health. Farms can help bridge gaps for species to travel. And even small natural features like vernal pools and hedgerows on private property can benefit species. Ultimately, a strong natural landscape will help contribute to that strong legacy. Our natural heritage systems also provide society with ecosystem services that are life-sustaining. They also conserve biological diversity and maintain ecological functions, including movement corridors for wildlife and endangered species habitat. Genetic diversity is also only possible through genetic exchange that occurs when species are able to travel between these core natural areas. Different animals have different movement ranges and different mating needs. I think of our family farm and how we need to swap out our bulls and our rams every year or two, or use them on rotation with other area farmers to ensure that our farm animals are genetically and biologically healthy and diverse. Wildlife rely on the same genetic exchange principles in order for their species to survive. There's lots of different scientific studies that demonstrate these sorts of conclusions, and much of it is commonly understood. We did want to include a neat example, though, that further illustrates this thought, and we picked Alice the moose, as some of you might be familiar with her story. To demonstrate the range of wildlife habitat and the need for some large-ranging species like moose to travel, the State University of New York collared a wild 700-pound female moose and released her into the Huntington Wildlife Forest in New York State back in 2000. From her home in the Adirondack Park, Alice traveled north for 2 years. She journeyed across the Canada-US border, swam across the St. Lawrence River, walked across Highway 401, and made her way all the way up to Algonquin Park in Quebec. Alice's journey spanned 570 kilometers and demonstrated the need for connected pathways. There's more literature on Alice's journey that's available online through the A2A Collaborative, which is a larger scale NHS system that acknowledges the need for wildlife to travel. Though Alice passed away a number of years ago, her story still remains a powerful one today. And when it comes to fish and wildlife management, there's a lot to consider. Different species have different needs. In Ontario, the province has directed natural heritage studies to consider 2 keystone species when considering mapping NHS features and corridors. Moose and fisher are commonly used because they have some of the largest habitat range needs in Ontario. The hope is that if you can protect NHS systems that are designed to support fishers and moose, that your system has a better chance to support other wildlife as well. I won't get into a debate around the ferocity of fishers, even though this photo makes them look like a possible cute pet. But know that fishers are native to North America. They have extensive ranges and are pretty picky in terms of natural habitat. They need areas with overhead tree cover, ideally more than 80%, and they prefer old growth forests and riparian areas around watercourses that are found within forests to survive, both of which are a rare occurrence in our region. Moose also rely on large, mature forested areas for habitat, shelter, and food. Large natural corridors are needed to support these animals, along with wider corridors to support their movement. Now, that doesn't mean that some of our other favorite or at-risk animals don't benefit from a strong, connected landscape. They do, from beavers to fish to birds and turtles, many of whom might be endangered or at risk due to declining habitat. And then there's also our honeybees and our environment and our livelihoods that rely on them for their existence. But in considering how much habitat is enough, we have to challenge ourselves to think like a moose when designing systems to protect. We already know and can agree that we need forest cover, wetland cover, and healthy water quality to sustain life, but we must also understand that our wildlife rely on large natural biodiversity hubs to survive. A simple comparison can also be made between moose and deer. Deer are able to travel through the landscape much more readily, and they rely on smaller woodlots and minimal shelter. Deer are a common sight and can rely sometimes on more isolated winter conditions compared to our moose friends. Truthfully, moose are located through our entire region. There's lots of them out there, but we don't see them very often because they rely on interior forests and find homes within these larger cores, which form part of our discussion today. In terms of long-term sustainability and to direct our efforts where they're needed most, we have to challenge ourselves to think like a moose. And with that, I'll pass things back to Allison.
Thanks, John. So we're going to go through the two components of a natural heritage system and give a little bit more information on what they are and how we determine them for the purposes of this project. So we've already talked about how natural heritage systems are connected core natural areas. So what's a core natural area? These are our large areas that have primarily natural cover. They're made up of woodlands and wetlands generally. And these are areas that we expect will stay naturalized for a long period of time, hundreds of years, as we were discussing. They're essential because they protect biodiversity, the moose, but many other species as well. And they also allow healthy animal populations to thrive. So you can have a good population of moose in Larose Forest and a good population of moose in Alfred Bog. They're often regionally and socially significant. So what we mean by that is they're important to the local community. People know them, people go visit them. They can be tourist destinations. They can be part of the local economy. They add to the value and character of the area. So often they have names, sometimes multiple names that they're known by. And they're often made up of mostly publicly owned land. At least in UCPR, Prescott and Russell, we have really good examples of large tracts of public land. And the biggest one I can think of is Larose Forest, for example. So this is the first kind of cut of the map that's showing just the core natural areas that we've identified. And you can see them. They also have names associated with them here. This map's available on the website as well. This is the St. Lawrence River, the Ottawa River, and then Prescott Russell County, Stormont Dundas County, and sort of all the cores within each county. And each local municipality does have a core natural area. Some of them are sort of spread out and longer. Some of them are very nice and solid like Larose Forest, but all of them are large, naturally vegetated and somewhat publicly owned forests or wetlands on our landscape. So how did we select them? We don't want to go into too much detail, and we can if people need to want to set up meetings with us to learn a little bit more about this. We can. We spent quite a bit of time on the geospatial analysis for this work, but we want to give you a quick overview today just so you can understand a bit better. Geographical information systems are sort of like computer modeling. We look at landscapes, we look at aerial imagery, and we performed a spatial analysis. So analyzing the landscape is one way to think of it. We took all of our wetland and woodland data and grouped it all together. We tried to find the largest and least fragmented areas of natural cover, being wetlands and woodlands primarily. The largest blocks were selected, and the resulting area was reviewed with municipal staff, county staff, and some of our internal experts as well. So we took a look at them. We made sure that the ranking and the selection made sense, that, we had set a cutoff threshold of about 10%, top 10%. And in some cases, we went back and added some based on the public land and based on the social significance to the area. So 2 areas I can think of specifically were Warwick Forest and Somerstown Forest in SD and G County, which were added based on their local significance. So the thresholds were adjusted to make sure we captured the areas that were deemed most significant, large, and also mostly publicly owned. And we got into this a little earlier, but a few questions have come in as to why some of the local areas that are significant to many residents were not included. They did need to meet a couple criteria. As we mentioned, they have to be a significant woodland or a significant wetland. It's also a regional scale, so it's important to keep in mind that these areas could become part of a natural heritage system that functions on a local scale. And there's lots of value in doing those kinds of exercises locally. This is seen as sort of the first step. This is the first laying out of this kind of connected system, and it all evolves from here. It's not sort of the end of the story, it's the beginning. And the other criteria that was important to us was publicly owned conservation land or ecologically sensitive land that's already protected. So we really wanted to invest in areas that we want to keep on the landscape for a very long period of time, and invest a lot of effort into protecting those and bringing connections to other natural cores. So here's an example, LaRose Forest, which is a massive 27,000 acre forest. It's one of the largest publicly owned county forests that you'll find. It does sustain moose, and we've got an average density there, even calculated. Lots of plant species, regionally significant and endangered species there. We've done tons of different bio blitzes and identified. You would be shocked at how many things live in LaRose Forest. 144 bird species, 29 mammal species, 500 fungus species. So every now and then they have days where they invite all these experts out to the forest to see how many things they can find, and it's unbelievable, the biodiversity within LaRose. But even with the LaRose being as big as it is, it needs to be connected to other large cores. And we do hear about moose populations becoming sort of genetically stuck, or even having them be only male moose hanging out in LaRose and only female moose hanging out in Alfred Bog. And we've heard that from different scientists from the MNRF as well. So even as big as it is, it needs to be connected for these populations to really thrive. So we have also the Alfred Bog, which is nearby. It's again a large bog marsh swamp. It's classified as a provincially significant wetland. It's also an area of natural and scientific interest with many rare wildlife species. Spotted turtles were noted, bog elfin butterfly, black-backed woodpeckers, different kinds of shrubs and moss. Obviously, bogs are not as showy as LaRose Forest, but they often hold rare, sensitive ecosystems, and the moose love it too. So we have our core natural areas on the landscape, and we've sort of analyzed those with the GIS method. The next thing was to find our linkage areas between the cores and connect all of these areas together. So we looked for areas that are predominantly natural, semi-natural, or rural. So I did see a quick question in the chat about what happens if trees are cut in a linkage area. It doesn't have to be absolutely forest cover the whole way along. Animals can move and will move along areas that are farmed, but there does need to be a significant amount of natural cover or areas for them to essentially be able to take shelter, to find food and forage, because again, because it's a regional scale, they're on a bit of a journey. So it's not a couple hours to get where they're going. They need to be able to, be safe, find food, find water along the way. So there can be a diversity of landscapes, but it does need to be either natural, semi-natural, or just a little bit of that sort of rural land. And without the corridors, wildlife populations basically become stranded. You lose genetic diversity, and therefore you lose biodiversity, and the populations will decline. So they are essential. Here's our map again with the corridors now placed between the linkages, and you can see how corridors on the landscape do change in size. So we'll get into how we laid these out and how we decided what they looked like. We used a GIS method again, a geographical information system method, essentially like a modeling system called the least cost corridor. And what this required us to do was take all the land cover and landscape of the county and assign it a cost. And the cost is related to how difficult or easy it would be for an animal to cross. And we did use moose and fisher as our sort of mental exercise for that. And it doesn't have to be precise. It's sort of a medium, high, low type scale. So natural cover received low movement score, meaning it's easy to move across. Agricultural areas were assigned a medium score. Sorry, natural cover was a low score. Agricultural was a medium score, just making sure I said that right. And urban areas and aggregate and major highways were assigned a high score. And then we took those and we kind of assigned different modifiers based on a few things. So we'll show you what that looks like. After you assign the landscape score, the analysis will produce a line. So between the two natural core areas, you can see on the top image in black, it essentially charts an easier path between. The easiest path it can find through the landscape that you've assigned a score to. And then you buffer that line and you create your corridor. And we saw that the corridors did tend to follow areas of natural cover and watercourses as much as possible, which makes sense based on how we've scored it. We chose the corridor width of generally 2 kilometers based on an abundance of literature, scientific literature, but we did choose to reduce it to 1 kilometer in a prime agricultural area. Prime agricultural areas are where farmland is fully invested, and the likelihood of that land coming back into natural cover is extremely low. So that kind of was recognized, but we did bring the corridor out to kind of encompass areas where there was a lot of natural cover as well. So we tried to flex the corridor and treat it in a very practical sense, not make it sort of a dream, but more of a reality. We also made corridors that linked into the neighboring areas where there were studies, and there actually are natural heritage systems all around both counties. So we were able to link our system out to all the adjacent counties, states, and provinces. So here's a look at that movement cost landscape that I was talking about. You can see at the top of the screen, there's sort of all the different types of land cover, as we call it. So natural and plantation are forested or natural vegetation. Inland water would be our lakes and rivers. Rural residential is small villages and hamlets. Agricultural, you can see, is scored in yellow. Lots of that on the landscape. Roads were red. Pits and quarries, which are very hazardous for animals to cross, were blue. Dark blue, and then the highways and our major urban centers were black, and you can see those are ranked the highest. We do not want to be encouraging animals to pass through highways or pass through cities, for example, and we know they wouldn't be. You can also see here where we placed boundary connections. So that shows you where we were linking up to a natural heritage system on the other side of the Ottawa River. So that's, it was really nice to be able to do that. Now we took our landscape scores that we just talked about, agricultural, urban, rural, forested, and we applied some modifying factors. If it was in a floodplain or had natural cover, we made it even easier. So we really wanted to drive the corridors through areas where there was natural cover or areas like floodplains where we know they're going to be sort of left and preserved. They're not going to be developed. They also tend, the floodplains tend to follow valleys, which are really good for animal movement. The agricultural lands were given a sort of +2 times modifier to make it even less likely to drive the corridor through the agricultural land. So we really wanted to keep the corridors, drive the corridors where there was natural cover, because we know that that's where the animals will tend to move. So a couple of shots of what this looked like and how we took it sort of from modeling into the beginning of reality. This was sort of the output of our model, showing various areas where only one corridor would be possible and other areas where there was a little more flexibility and discretion needed to choose the corridor. So once we saw the model, we had to go through and sort of plot these lines out in reality on the map. and what it looks like in the end with all the buffering, the analysis by experts, the reviews by municipal planners. Sort of our best foot forward map is this one, and it is a little bit busy. That's because we have, everything on this one. We have water courses, we have the linkages, we have the cores, and you can also see in light green all the publicly owned conservation land. And that's really important for us to kind of take a look at that and recognize how many of these areas are already in the process of becoming large protected conservation areas. You can see our connections to other studies here going out on almost every side. You can see in the city of Ottawa, we were able to connect really nicely where Larose Forest actually extends outside of Prescott and Russell. And you can see how the landscape linkages do change in their width depending where they're going. They come down through natural cover and then they follow the South Nation River right within the valley through a large portion of agricultural land. So it really reflects the actual landscape, and it successfully connects all of our natural cores, which was our goal. Some people were asking about conservation lands and what they are and why they were included. So we did quite a big effort to put together what had actually never been gathered previously, which is all the land that's held in public ownership for the purpose of conservation. So how much land on our landscape is actually protected sort of in perpetuity forever. We looked at a lot of different sources. A lot of people do own conservation land within our area, which is great. We did not include things like municipal parks. We didn't include municipal land that's not used solely for conservation, because it's possible those lands can change hands, can be converted to residential, etc. So we plan to put this up on our geoportal in the near future, which I think will be great for people to have access to, not just to get out there and find a new conservation area you might love, but just let people know how much land actually is being protected, which is encouraging. So just shifting gears into our policy side of the project, these public information sessions are really the first opportunity for people to participate. It's not the end of our conversation, it's the start. The comments that we receive will be taken into consideration by the counties. We will put everything together, have conversations with people over the coming weeks, and then basically put together a final package for the United Counties to consider when they're doing their official plan update, which is going on through the next year or so. And then there'll be another set of public meetings where people are able to give sort of that final input into the schedules of the official plan. We are updating policies on environmental impact studies, groundwater, significant and sensitive groundwater areas, and our significant valley lands. We also plan to include policies to enhance, protect, and restore the critical habitat within the natural heritage system and promote habitat conservation, connectivity, biodiversity, and climate change. So there's a lot of policies being written to be added, kind of supporting all of these goals, as they are obviously very important. We wanted to mention two specific policy investigations, one being the significant valley lands of Larose Forest. If you've been lucky enough to go and walk at Larose, you may have seen these beautiful valley lands. They're absolutely magnificent. You kind of notice them right away. They're natural areas in a valley where water flows, very self-explanatory, but they're very important wildlife corridors. And if you do go out for a walk at Larose, take a look and see how many animal tracks you see down in the valley. They're very, very important, but unfortunately they haven't previously been identified on the county's official plan schedules. And the county reached out and wanted to change that. So they asked us to use, again, our GIS methods. We used what we call LIDAR. It's a very cool looking elevation model, but we essentially calculated based on certain criteria where these valley lands exist that are considered to be significant, so very large, deep valley lands. And we mapped them out for the county for them to consider including in their official plan schedules. And we hope that this will lead to more significant valley lands being identified and protected for the value that they provide to the natural heritage system. So there's a little screenshot there of the areas in gray along the blue water courses are the areas that came up as being what we call significant. So that's one thing we looked into. The second was the sensitive groundwater recharge areas. because of the unique geology in Prescott and Russell as a result of sort of the history of the Champlain Sea and all the things that have happened over many, many, many years. There's some unique geology there, and it was important to the county that we find a way to reflect that in the official plan, that we look at some additional mapping products, and we also look at enhancing the policies of the official plan to protect those sensitive groundwater recharge areas, both for water quality and for water quantity. So the proposed mapping that we've put together, it incorporates a bunch of different data sources. There's some great research that was already done. And we have a hydrogeologist on staff who's very experienced with these things, was able to pull a lot of newer information and kind of put it all together on one map. And if you're wondering what karst is, because a lot of people don't know about it until they know about it, sometimes people call it a cave, a sinkhole, or a disappearing stream. And if you ever hear those references now, you'll know it's actually a unique geological formation called karst. And it does pose, it's very interesting, but it also poses a risk to the quality of groundwater. And so it's very important to watch what kind of development happens on top of karst. And it's something that South Nation regulates under our Conservation Authorities Act as well. So how did these policies get applied? Really, in practice, the policies will only affect people when they want to do development. That's sort of the most practical way you're going to bump up against the official plan. If you're looking to rezone, do a severance, do a subdivision, you're going to have to comply with the policies of the official plan. We work together with the municipalities in the county to review the planning applications that come in and ensure that they're consistent with the natural heritage policies. So South Nation works really collaboratively with the county, and we make sure that the natural heritage system would be considered. We review if it's provincially significant wetlands, and we also implement regulations as well to prevent impacts to watercourses, impacts to wetlands, for example. So it really has to do with when you're starting to develop or alter your property in some way. That's when you may end up working with us and with the municipality to review what kind of policies would apply to you. In terms of an average property owner and day to day, it wouldn't have a big impact. You can still, it doesn't regulate tree cutting in any way, but municipal tree bylaws can do that. So where they exist, obviously you would need to comply with those, but it's really going to be development or site alteration within a core or a linkage area. So that's really when you're going to want to come and see us first, arrange perhaps like a pre-consultation meeting. We can explain sort of what's going on. This is for farmers, for residents, for businesses, for big developers, everyone. And we did note that some people were worried about taxes and property valuation, as people usually are. Your property would already include that kind of assessment. So if you have a provincially significant wetland on your property, that would already be noted. You may also have managed forest tax incentive programs related to woodlots. None of that would be affected. And in our opinion, the natural heritage system really could help increase property value. It seems, especially with the COVID pandemic, that we've learned the value of these natural spaces and how important it is to have them nearby. So having more conservation land and more protected land around your house is, I think, beneficial generally. For farmers, it's important to note that again, this is a provincially mandated requirement. And the province also says that nothing in Policy 2.1, which is our natural heritage section, can limit the ability of agricultural uses to continue. So that's very clear. And farming activities are all permitted within the natural heritage system, including all the on-farm diversified and ag-related uses. So that's great. And the only time you would bump up against a natural heritage feature would be construction of new buildings. And that's something you would already be familiar with on your property. As I mentioned, we're not adding any new features, we're identifying them in a different way. It was important to us throughout the entire process of doing this study to recognize the importance of agriculture in our area, the importance of it on the landscape. It's a predominant land use for our area, and it's a huge part of our culture and economy. Almost all of the province's prime agricultural land is in Southern Ontario, and for Eastern Ontario, it's all here. It's very, very important that we balance the needs of the environment and of the economy and the needs of private landowners. And it's something that, as John mentioned, we've been working at for years through our Agricultural Forest Cover Committee. It's something that we take very seriously, and we see ourselves as working with people to try to make the best possible decisions for them on their land. We recognize that they're working landscapes. They provide valuable ecosystem services in their function, pollination, carbon sequestration, soil retention, and wildlife habitat. For many animals, they don't mind walking through a field. Our mapping as such, since it was so important to us, we started out based on the principles from the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. We made sure to incorporate all their recommendations from similar work in the growth plan. And we really recognize and value the practices that allow us to work collaboratively with private landowners to protect the environment and improve the quality of these linkages. And essentially, we're saying that we hope that this information can be used by people to make really good decisions and to maybe rehabilitate some creeks that need some natural vegetation, plant a few trees, buffer a few watercourses in these areas where we're letting you know that it's extremely important for our local biodiversity. I'll turn it back over to John.
Thanks, Allison. And for those still watching, thanks again for tuning in today and for staying with us through our presentation. Before we turn to any unaddressed questions in the chat, I'd like to share some comments on how you can provide feedback to inform our next steps. And if you've been holding on to a question that you're hoping to share, this is a great time to drop that in the chat so we can get to it once we're through this. We will be providing draft maps and policy updates to the counties to review in March. The nature of the feedback that we receive from people over the next few weeks are going to inform our timelines. And we want to be really clear and sincere in saying that we really do welcome any and all comments. And like Allison said previously, this meeting does not replace the county or municipality's requirement to host a public meeting to make changes to their official plan, which will still need to occur once any updates are incorporated in the future. Should you be interested in providing comments, and we really hope you are, we encourage people to watch this presentation, to review the documents we've got posted up on our project webpage, again at nation.on.ca/NHS. There's also an interactive story map on there that further explains some of the concepts we've shared today, along with some other web tools and a feedback form online. And I do want to comment and make a note that official comments, once you're ready to provide feedback, to be considered, we do need you to submit them through that feedback form. We've also met with some stakeholder groups already in advance of this meeting and over the last few years. Some people rather have made some pretty neat and great contributions of local knowledge that have helped draft some of the work that we've prepared already, along with some support for other products like the significant groundwater recharge areas that Allison mentioned and some other neat policy tools. We're still interested in meeting with other groups in the coming weeks as we prepare these updates for the counties. And this will be a great space for groups to come together if you have any specific questions, or if you're looking for us to explore a specific area in your neck of the woods a little more closely. We were really hoping when we set out to do this project to do most of this consultation in person, which is our general practice. Obviously, with the pandemic continuing to unfold, that's just not a reality right now. So we are keeping as much as we can virtual, but please, of course, if you need accommodations, let us know and we'll make sure to put something together that works. Should you be interested, there is a meeting request form on our website, and staff will connect with you directly to find a time that works best for you and for staff. We also created, and this was based on a popular online request, we created an online app that allows you to report local wildlife and animal sightings in the region. And I see people in the chat already talking about some of the sightings they made, and thank you for that. We've integrated this app with data provided from iNaturalist, which is already a popular mobile app that a lot of people use to report animal sightings. You're welcome to download this app, but you're also welcome to report any animal sightings directly from your computer. Again, you can access this right from our project webpage. Within the story map on our website, we've also integrated the results from this app so you can see where people are reporting their sightings. I saw a comment around confidentiality. We don't publish any of the results or your name or the location, but they are geo-referenced in this portal. So this is basically what you can see once you report this data. And we've only made it possible for some of the commonly reported animals like moose, turtles, and beavers to be visible on this platform. And what we've done is we've gone ahead and displayed it with roadkill data in red. The red points on this map and they are visible in the app, are locations where someone has reported a vehicle collision to the OPP over the last 10 years. These reports are often for larger animal collisions, like for moose or deer, that are largely reported for insurance purposes, but they also help us plot areas where animals are often found traveling, and it paints a pretty interesting portrait of our county and provincial road system. What we can start to see as people report their sightings as well is clusters being reported in areas that we consider to be significant. They're areas, like Allison said, that maybe are already provincially significant wetlands or already areas of natural and scientific interest. But there are also spaces that are publicly available. The Larose Forest, for example, is already visible on this screen if you recognize a little cluster of blue dots on there. And that's just based already on citizen reports that have been made through the app, which is really neat to see. And we thank everyone who's made contributions thus far to that app. And with that, I think, Allison, let's see if we can address some of the comments in the chat to help wrap up our meeting. And while I do that, I put up some contact information from some of the different partners who are leading and reviewing this study. Of course, you're welcome to use the feedback forms, you're welcome to use the online tools, but at any time, if you have questions, especially if you'd like to direct them to your own municipality, you're welcome to contact anyone on the screen here. And I'm going to pull up the live chat feature and see where we can start, Allison.
Yeah, there's lots there. There's one question on clear cutting practices and what can be done to stop them. And I think I tried to fit it in during the presentation, but the municipal tree conservation bylaws are the most common way to do that in Ontario. There's many municipalities who have had those bylaws for many, many years, going back to, I think, the 60s. There's a lot of areas in Ontario where there's a lot less forest cover where they were enacted. And I think the history here has been trying to work collaboratively with landowners through stewardship for many, many years. Tree planting programs, the clean water programs, the stuff John was talking about. But there is always the option if a municipality and the council decides that it's enough of an issue for them to enact those tree conservation bylaws. And I think those are being considered in North Glengarry currently and in Alfred Plantagenet. That's been put on the table. So that power truly and only rests with the municipality or the county. It's not something that South Nation can regulate. The one exception to that rule would be within provincially significant wetlands. So our job is to make sure that no development or site alteration impacts the hydrology of a wetland. And in our estimation, a clear cut would impact the hydrology. So that is something that we do regulate in those spaces.
And I see a comment on where the PSWs are within the study. Largely, they form many of these public cores that we've identified in the map, but we recognize that we didn't outline them specifically on the draft maps that we posted. But we do have a link on our main website on our geoportal where you can see all of the different provincially significant wetlands that are already zoned, they're already protected, they've already been evaluated by the province. And those are areas that, like Allison mentioned, are regulated. And I think we'll go ahead and make an update to our project webpage so you can grab that link yourself and check out some of those different features. I also see a question from Lisa. Hi, Lisa, about how the study will inform and probably work with private landowners, I think related to incentives. Largely, and I hinted at some of this at the beginning, we do our best to offer as many stewardship programs as we can that will benefit these sorts of systems. I think of things like our clean water program, our tree planting programs, but there's lots of other added benefits where we can help work with people to get those trees planted along water courses to make sure that there's adequate buffers in spaces that matter the most. And part of this study, like Allison mentioned, was so that we too can direct our work where it matters most. And something that we've offered over the last 2 years anyways is extra incentives for farmers who wish to plant trees on water courses. So we recognize, and this was something that came out of our forest conservation initiative, it was something that was very important. We agreed that we needed forest cover, but I think collectively agreed, and collectively from the farmers that participated, that where they matter most are certainly around our water courses, or certainly around our lakes and rivers. And so we amended our program 2 years ago to include extra incentives to make it as easy as possible for anyone interested in putting more trees along water courses. So there's more information on our forest conservation initiative on our website, and you'll see some links there that help provide some good landowner resources.
I can dig into briefly the large companies buying farmland because it came up in our agricultural forest cover committee. So I just wanted to share that with Lisa. I hopefully got your name right. Sorry about that if I didn't. It did come up as a concern in the agricultural community as well. And obviously there's always a fear when outside landowners come in who don't sort of know the values of the community. And there's a lot more sort of stewardship and best management practices by farmers who live here than by farmers who don't, is kind of the concern. Really, there's nothing that we or the municipality could do to prevent people from purchasing land. It's a much bigger sort of question and problem. There are areas that are dealing with this on a much larger scale, places like Prince Edward Island. You can kind of look into that. So sometimes it's foreign ownership, sometimes it's just out of area ownership. Really, again, it comes back to tree conservation bylaws. And, you know, people aren't cutting trees in Quebec because there's bylaws that say they can't. They're coming over here to do it, is sort of what we hear a lot from people. So if there's nothing really, I would think that that would be probably not an avenue to pursue. A similar kind of difficult question was about the Alfred Bog, and I don't want to avoid these difficult questions. Unfortunately, they won't really have satisfactory answers, but we won't avoid them. What was done to prevent big companies from stripping 300 acres of peat moss? Number one, it was before my time. Number two, everything I would say would be hearsay and probably incorrect. What I know is that we were able to protect part of the Alfred Bog, and some of it was lost, we know. And that there was a fund established at the time. So there are some funds that still exist to purchase wetlands and to conserve them. And it ties into your third question about Dickinson's Creek. We are working with the MNRF right now to get sort of updated information about Dickinson's Creek to find out if it has a provincially significant wetland status. And if so, maybe there's an opportunity to purchase more of those lands. There's county lands there, and there's also South Nation has lands in that area. And I understand the ministry may be holding funds related to being able to secure more land. So hopefully it's going to be a good news story there. You can tune in on February 16th at Alfred Plantagenet Council, where we'll be giving a presentation specifically on that topic. So I won't say too much more about it tonight. We'll try to get to some of the other questions.
Yeah, and I think too on Alfred Bog, something that really helped bring all of that collective together. And I think some of the folks that are commenting may have participated in some of these efforts in the past, but a lot of this was spearheaded by the community. The neighbors, the people that relied on those functions, they really spearheaded a lot of that public land investment, bringing partners together like the Nature Conservancy of Canada to help direct more funding to that area, to put some of that land in the public trust. And we see that happen in places all over the region. And in thinking of the Jessup Falls comments as well, those are a lot of great community-led initiatives. The people that lived in these communities valued these features and worked hard to protect them. And we want to recognize that effort, and we want to recognize that we share those values as well.
Mm-hmm. I did see an interesting comment from Jeff Cote about, are the municipal planning authorities considering bylaws to support conservation or enhancement of the natural heritage system corridors, essentially bylaws related to land alteration or riparian cover setbacks. I think right now only Alfred Plantagenet is considering the tree conservation bylaw, and that would sort of pertain as well to land alteration, I think, and riparian cover. Those bylaws can address tree conservation in many different ways. You can target them to a water course, you could target them to cutting over a certain size, you could target them to any kind of feature you want. But other than that, I haven't heard of any intentions to do that. I think, this, like I was mentioning, is the beginning of the story. And we really do hope that these maps and this landscape analysis is going to be used to direct things like stewardship, but also to direct things potentially like bylaws. So if you were going to decide to pass a bylaw that would protect watercourses, the ones along linkages would be considered the most important. And so we're hoping that that is valuable information for these municipal planning authorities.
I see a question around core natural areas and how they correspond to headwaters. I think that's a great comment. For those familiar with headwater drainage features, they're the beginning parts of a river or stream system and are often some of the most significant, especially in terms of managing water and managing water quality. And so we, through our clean water program, direct as much effort as we can to headwater drainage work to make sure that those areas are as protected and contributing to healthy systems. And there's a number of good examples in this map that include good headwater drainage features. I think of the Hammond Wetland complex up in Clarence Rockland. There's some great headwater drainage features up there that form systems that lead into the South Nation River. And even in Millrose Forest, I mean, the significant valley lands are phenomenal, but there's also some really great headwater drainage features that help filter water, help keep the stream healthy, and really help that the South Nation River especially maintain a good, stable, and reasonable water quality.
Protecting a bog on private land. Really, if the bog is not, I'm assuming it's not identified as a provincially significant wetland. Otherwise, that protection would already be inherent. So if it were not identified as provincially significant, there's a possibility for the municipality to consider making it a locally significant wetland. And I think there's a lot of interest being generated for that idea. Essentially, that allows it to be afforded a protection like zoning, restrictive zoning that says, no development here. And then it's something that the Conservation Authority could work with a municipality to also regulate those locally significant wetlands or bogs or swamps or marshes. So it's an interesting question, and it probably depends on exactly what you're talking about, Suzanne. But if you wanted to send us a message, we could probably talk to you a bit further about that offline.
I'm just scrolling myself, Allison, to see what else we might not have addressed. For folks, if you're still holding on a question, I think we've got a few minutes that we could stick around for while we go through these.
I like the acknowledgement about virtual opportunities enabling some to participate who otherwise wouldn't have been able to. And I think that's really nice to hear. And we hoped that that was the case. And also people maybe who couldn't attend could watch the recording, which is also really nice and not normally available. So thanks for mentioning that. And it makes us feel a bit better because we do want to make sure that we're giving you the best experience that we can in these sort of strange times.
And that's a good comment too on the recording. We have recorded the presentation, so we will try and get that uploaded probably by the end of the week if we can, for folks who weren't able to tune in.
I see a question about collaborating with farmers.
Sure.
So the original sort of recommendation to look at stewardship incentives was born out of our agricultural forest cover committee. So a lot of what we did sort of came from, and I was on that committee, but kind of I alluded to, there's been sort of years and years building into this to how to do it right. So we collaborated with the agricultural community many years ago. We formed another committee that also made the recommendation for this study, which farmers were on. I found OFA position, OFA being Federation of Agriculture. I found the position paper. So a lot of sort of, I guess, nerdy policy stuff, but we found a lot of position papers that were written by the OFA, and we took those into very serious consideration early on. And then we met with a couple federations of agriculture early on. So before this meeting, had calls with our OFA representative for the area, Jackie. And I guess in sort of a personal sense, many of us live and grew up on farms in the area. So it's something that we've spent a lot of time considering, a lot of time working with our agricultural reps. And then when it came to policy work, we spent a lot of time actually reading the position papers from agricultural agencies. So now it's out there. Like I said, we met with a few agencies early, a couple presidents of federations early, just to see how they were feeling, and we plan to meet with more in the future. So collaborating is kind of working together on this policy and mapping stuff, but I think the more important collaborations are what come after, where we try to put some projects on the ground with people who live and work and play within the system.
And I think too, just to make it clear on who might have contributed back in 2017, 2018, we did our best to include anyone who wanted to be engaged. And when I said 24 reps on that original working group, that included presidents and policy advisors from every local federation of agriculture. We let them decide who might be best to participate and engage with. But we also included reps from l'Union des Cultivateurs Francophones, the National Farmers Union, Christian Farmers Federation. We did our best to engage anyone and everyone, and that effort, and Allison was, I think, fortunate to participate in that a number of years ago, really helped form the basis of a lot of the things that we discussed today.
Some people just giving nice comments, which are always really appreciated, especially online. Sometimes it feels like a dangerous place to be online, but you guys are making us feel really welcomed, and thank you very much. And I do see some comments about Russell Township and how they can be supported by the community. That's exactly what we want people to do with this. Take it and run with it, make it yours, find a way to, enhance those linkages and protect those cores. Maybe John can make that slogan a little snazzier for me for next time.
Certainly.
Cindy's kind of wondering, what exact incentives are there? We often reference our programs, our tree planting programs. We've modified them to make them more available to anyone who wants to plant along a watercourse. There used to be size restrictions, and we eliminated those because we wanted that to be a priority. But there's also things like the Alternative Land Use Service, I think it's called, ALICE. Yep. And they'll often pay a small amount of money to people. People like to be sort of almost have their land rented if they're going to keep it out of production. So that's an option I've seen work really, really well. And then there's also our edible buffers project, where we can plant some like fruit trees and berry bushes and different things for farmers to get legitimately an alternative food source out of the buffers along their municipal drains. Farmers are very business minded. They need to think about these things in order to survive. So often it comes down to finding solutions that make sense for them financially. And many farmers are interested in donating lands and forested lands as well too. So they are stewards of the land, and our study really truly reflects our belief that they're going to adopt this and work with us to make it better. So it's always a gamble to trust in partnership and collaboration, but that's what South Nation does best.
And I think also on programs like the MIFTIP program, we talked about that managed forest tax incentive program for people that have woodlots over 10 acres on their property. You are eligible for a tax incentive. You can receive up to a 75% reduction in your property tax. What's required in exchange, though, is a forest management plan, and that plan must identify that or make a commitment between the owner and the province that they'll manage that forest for the next 10 years. And we do have a really great program that's been funded by our partner counties for quite some time. It's called the Woodlot Advisory Service. And through this service, we offer free visits depending on the needs of the person, whether it be a farmer or someone who just owns a little chunk of land. And we'll answer any questions you have. We'll make you maps. We'll come to site. We'll give you woodlot advice if that's what you're looking for. And if you're interested in becoming eligible for that incentive, that tax break, we'll also offer grants of $500 to help pay for that cost as well. So there's some great added benefit. We really do want to do our best to help protect the forests that are on the landscape, and we think a lot of people are interested in doing the same.
So I think that's it for questions. If we missed any, please submit them. As John mentioned, all kinds of different ways you can do that, because we do want to speak to you and hear from you.
So I'll just say merci encore à tous de nous avoir rejoints ce soir et de partager vos commentaires avec nous. We're really looking forward to hearing from those who are interested and sharing feedback. And we do look forward to working with the counties to help them update their natural heritage system policies this year. And with that, guys, stay well, stay safe, and have a great night. Merci.